Mark, welcome to the Hack Your Life podcast.
Hey, thanks so much, Isaiah. Good to be with you.
Man, great to have you. We're going to be talking about your new book that's coming out really shortly. So I'm going to publish this Monday. So the day I publish it, it'll be the day after November 2nd. Do It for a Day is coming out. Man, I'm excited. This is the sequel to your book last year. Is that correct?
It is, yeah, sequel to Win the Day. And this one is let's take some of those 7 habits and turn it into a 30-day habit challenge.
I love it. I love it. So, kind of starting off and building the framework for the conversation, Mark. In the book, you talked about, show me your habits, I'll show you your future. Can you maybe just talk about the importance of cultivating these daily habits?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you are what you repeatedly do. In a sense, a little bit of tough love up front. Your life is perfectly designed for the results you're getting. Now, the good news is, change a habit and you're going to change your trajectory. But what I've learned in going after goals, and, I've got 100 life goals. I lead a church that has strategic objectives. And so a lot of my life revolves around going after goals, but you have to reverse engineer them into daily habits. And that's where the magic is. If you can do it day in and day out. And so that really is the heartbeat behind the book. And destiny is not a mystery. Destiny is daily habits.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think so many of us, I've been guilty of this as well, Mark, but we can look at our long term and have giant ambitions, have these big goals, and we get excited about what we believe God has in store for us. But we really underestimate the short term. And so maybe talk about what role the short term plays in the long game, if you will.
Yeah, it's really having your eye on both. Uh, I believe faith is being sure of what you hope for. So you need some kind of future goal that this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do. But then it really is coming up with a plan to get there. Very practical example. A few years ago, ran a marathon. And I didn't just go out and run 26.2 miles. I would have pulled a hamstring in a hurry. I downloaded a training plan, and over 6 months, I did 72 training runs totaling 475 miles. Then and only then was I able to run that marathon. Whatever it is, it's knowing the objective, where you want to be, and then figuring out what is the habit that's going to get me there.
Yeah. You use two terms in the book, Mark, one being habit switching and then the other habit stacking. Can you maybe explain what those two mean?
Yeah, and I'll keep it pretty simple. Habit stacking is this idea that you couple maybe habits that are harder to cultivate with rhythms or routines or things that come naturally. Let's say that exercise doesn't come easy for you. You'd rather watch TV. Well, what if you did those two things together? You get on a treadmill, get on a bike, and that's when you allow yourself to maybe consume some entertainment, but you're getting in shape while you're doing it. I have a daily Bible reading plan, and I do that reading in the morning with a cup of coffee because that's how my day starts. And I found that coupling those two things, habit stacking, if you will, is a great way to do it. Habit switching is a little bit different. It's this idea that the best way to break a habit is to make a good habit. And you've got to find a way to replace that habit. Great example of this. I believe that spiritual formation is habit formation, and the Sermon on the Mount is a great example. 6 counter habits, if you will. Love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, bless those who curse you, turn the other cheek, go the extra mile, and give the shirt off of your back. Those are not natural reactions. Those are learned habits. They're counter habits. Um, And so you've got to find a way to not just not do what's wrong, but to really find a way to come up with a habit to maybe help you um, pursue those goals that you're going after. And so habit stacking, habit switching are pretty key when it comes to habit formation.
Yeah, no, those are definitely powerful, powerful exercises. So Mark, the thing I love about the book, so there's, you have the usual format of chapters, but with this, it's days. Can you maybe lay out why you had done that for this book?
Yeah, I'll just make it personal, Isaiah. Years ago, I wrote a book on prayer called The Circle Maker. And I followed it up with a 40-day prayer challenge called Draw the Circle. And I started getting feedback from people like, hey, that doing it for 40 days really helped me cultivate that prayer habit. And it gave me momentum and it gave me direction. And so I thought, hey, let's take this last book, Win the Day, and let's do something similar. Let's do a 30-day habit challenge and see if we can't help people gain momentum, gain confidence as they go after some of these goals. And so you're right. The book is divided into days, and each day's reading really is only about 10 or 12 minutes. But then there is a critical question every single day. How do I make it a habit? And that's where we begin to put it into practice. And so I think it's the kind of book that it'll be your friend for 30 days and help you keep consistent sort of in this habit challenge. And then when you finish, hey, maybe there's another habit that you need to go back, start all over again.
Yeah, no, without question. You talk about the challenge, and you talk about the 30-day challenge to do it with, your staff or your friends or your family. And you also talk about how, you're the average of the 12 people you're around. So obviously relationships are giant and they can coincide with our habits. So how important is it to maybe cultivate really healthy relationships around cultivating maybe new daily habits?
Yeah, I think it's habit formation is a team sport. And almost like you're at the gym, you're on the bench press, you're trying to do one extra rep. If you don't have someone spotting you, Isaiah, you're in trouble
Yeah.
because that
Yeah.
thing's probably going to just land on your chest and you're going to have to either roll it down your body or tilt it and make a big noise in the gym, which is a little embarrassing. And now we're having a little bit of fun. But my idea or my point is this, that like you need people who are going to hold you accountable. You need people who are going to encourage you. You need people who are just going to be in your corner. I mean, I think that's in part why Alcoholics Anonymous is successful, is that you get in a group of people and it helps you stay accountable to the process. Years ago, I came up with a list of 100 life goals, and but they really revolved around me, and I felt like they were a little bit too self-centered. And what I did is I went back through and added a relational element to those goals. And I will tell you this, um, it felt like a great accomplishment running my first triathlon, but it doesn't even compare with doing it with my son, who at the time was 13. Like crossing that finish line together was just at least twice the joy. And so it's this idea of a rising tide floats all boats. Like, let's make sure that we are surrounding ourselves with people who will stretch our faith, who will challenge us and help us dream a little bit bigger. And so, yeah, uh, it takes teamwork to make the dream work, as they
Yeah.
say.
No, it's so true. And I think it's twofold. I mean, because we're gaining value as we, create these habits with other individuals, then, iron sharpens iron. A lot of times we're getting value as well. And so, I think, yeah, everybody benefits as a result of that. And I think sometimes it can be hard to, because our knee jerk reaction can be to isolate, especially now. You know what I mean? We've just coming off of all these, the stay-at-home orders and isolation and quarantine. And so, creating habits, I think so many of us have kind of just isolated ourselves, but I think we just gain so much value. Again, we're adding value to people's lives, but then we're also getting value ourselves. So that's definitely critically important. Um, Also, Mark, in the book, you talk about a Duke study that 45% of daily habits is automatic. And kind of talking back on quarantine, I know when it had first started, personally, I had kind of taken a assessment of the daily habits that I had created, and then kind of wanted to see where I was going to go with it. And what I found was a lot of them, so many of them, Mark, I didn't even think about. They were just habits that when I wake up, maybe I was looking at my phone automatically, and I wasn't even intentionally thinking, oh, I'm going to pick up my phone. It's time to wake up. I was just doing these things, and there was a number of different things, but maybe talk about the importance of kind of cultivating habits and kind of moving away from these habits that we do unintentionally, and namely obviously these bad habits that we're trying to move away from.
Yeah. Well, for starters, all of us are creatures of habit. And that's not bad unless they're bad habits, right? So, habituation actually has a really positive side to it, that you don't have to relearn everything you do every day. And it's a way you save time and energy. The problem with that is this: once something becomes second nature, you don't give it a second thought. And I would argue that there are times when you need to deconstruct and reconstruct a morning routine, or uh, a workout routine, or you can fill in the blank with 100 other things. Um, I think you've got to find a way to really do a good inventory of your time. For example, average person spends 142 minutes on social media. That represents 15% of our waking hours. And so my question would be, is that the best and highest use of our time? And I think sometimes we just allow ourselves to fall into these patterns, and these patterns become habits, and those habits ultimately determine who we become. And so you're absolutely right. It's identifying the habits that are going to make us or break us, and then just putting them into practice. And it doesn't have to be something huge. It can honestly be some of those little habits. It's 5 minutes of meditation in the morning. It's doing your age and sit-ups every day. It's writing uh, 200 words a day. But it's about the consistency. And that really is the key, that you have to do it for a day. Then you get up the next day and do it all over again.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Can you maybe break down just a little further, and you don't have to go in detail, but about micro habits versus macro habits?
Yeah. And I think, you um, a micro habit, or maybe what I would call a domino habit, just that 2-inch habit. Um, at first it might seem like, what difference does it make? But over time, it can really flip the script. So good example. Um, we don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. We basically see what we're looking for. If you're looking for something to complain about, you'll always find it. If you're looking for something to be grateful for, you will always find it. So there's a simple little habit of keeping a gratitude journal, and let's just say 3 gratitudes a day, that you write down 3 gratitudes a day. That doesn't seem like much, but you do that for a month, and you've got 90 gratitudes. You do that for a year, and you've got 1,000 gratitudes. And I would argue that if you do that, you are going to cultivate an attitude of gratitude. Your outlook on life is going to totally change. And it starts with just this little micro habit. And now, unfortunately, for better or for worse, those good habits or bad habits, they usually do start out as little habits, but over time, of course, really get woven into our character. And so, but you have to start small.
Yeah, no, it's so true. That's so valuable. we talked earlier about, long-term goals versus short-term habits. And I know that, our tomorrow, Mark, is made up of a lot of little todays, just compounded day after day after day. And so maybe there's somebody listening and they've just built a life to where every habit seems like a bad habit. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's they wake up, like I talked about, maybe looking at your phone for too long. You talked about the 15%. I'm sure there's a lot of people, if we're being honest with ourselves, that are going over that 15%. Or maybe it's our eating habits. I like to be vulnerable on this podcast, but I had my first son born this year, Mark, and I gained a lot of weight, honestly, and I've lost it, thank God, through discipline and habits. But it's sometimes so easy. You know what I mean? It can be
Yeah.
so easy. It's just, well, I have $300 worth of Chick-fil-A gift cards. I guess we'll eat out for 5 weeks, 6 weeks, and the next thing you know, you gained all this weight. Or, well, I'll spend this much time on TikTok, and then before you know it, you spent 2 hours. And I think so many times we get in these habits that really just build this really negative life if we're not
Yes.
careful,
Yep.
And
And
so,
we get overwhelmed, right,
yeah,
Isaiah?
yeah,
And then it feels like, well, I'm never gonna get out of this. And that's where I think it's going back to the basics of doing those little things. You almost have to prove to yourself that that you can implement a habit and then do it for 30 days.
yeah,
You almost have to prove it to yourself in a small way. And then you go back at it and maybe do something that's a little bit bigger, a little bit bolder.
yeah. And I think too, it's just as you do it, it just gets easier every day. I found myself,
Yeah.
and because I talked about that was so I had a 6 week maternity leave. And Mark, I don't even know exactly how much weight, but it was a lot of weight in 6 short weeks. And
Yep.
actually, you talked about a marathon. So a couple of years ago, I had ran a full marathon as well. And I thought to myself, how did I get this far gone this quickly? But the great news is, listen, every day is a new opportunity. And that's what I love. Every single day is just another opportunity to start and get after it. And so, what are some, let's just be really practical, Mark. What are some good habits we can start every day? Whether it's spiritually, whether it's related to eating, or, maybe life hacking. What are some places we can kind of start to build a life that's a lot healthier?
Yeah. I think, um, physical health, mental health, spiritual health. Maybe I can just give a couple of examples. Um, there's so much noise in our lives. Everybody's vying for our attention. There are social media algorithms that are designed to capture our attention. Everybody wants a piece of us. I would say 5 minutes of meditation. And, for me, that would be taking a verse of scripture and then word by word, just meditating on it and just enjoying God's presence for 5 minutes, taking a deep breath, de-stressing, recalibrating. It could be something like that on the spiritual side. I do think that gratitude journal idea is a really good one. And then on the physical side, I tend to be goal oriented, so I need some kind of challenge that I'm going after, whether it's running a marathon or this year it was biking a century. Um, like you, Isaiah, there was probably a season for 4 or 5 years that let's just say that I was not at my optimal body mass index to the point that my body was breaking down in different ways.
Mm,
And I had to sort of draw a line in the sand. And this is where I would say you can't just set goals. You have to schedule goals and you need a start date and an end date. So to make it personal, I felt called to write when I was 22, but I didn't write a book until I was 35. 13 years it took to write that first book. What happened was I employed a commitment device, which I write about a little bit and do it for a day. I leveraged my 35th birthday as a deadline. And so you have to find a way to hold your feet to the fire and not give yourself an out, and really force yourself to keep going after it until you finish it. And so, a dream without a deadline is called a wish. Uh,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
wishing on a star isn't going to get us where we need to go. And so I think there are some practical measures we can take on all of those fronts. And it really is just choosing that one thing that we feel like is going to have the biggest payoff, be it a running training plan or a daily Bible reading plan or anything else.
Yeah. No, it's so valuable. And you talked about authoring. We actually talked before the podcast had started about how you had read 3,000 books before you wrote your first one. And I know personally too, I have a long ways to go. I'm 27 years old, and with podcasting, I started in 2016. And to look back, Mark, on those first episodes is really cringy. You know what I mean? But
Yes.
I had to start somewhere. And as I started those daily habits, and even though they were maybe uncomfortable, I was preparing for the future. And I'm still not, to that future yet. But I think so much of our preparation leads to the future. And we can look at maybe it's influencers, that we follow, or these leaders that we look up to and think, oh, I want to do what they're doing. Or maybe somebody's listening and really admires you, Mark, and they're like, man, I want to do what Mark's doing. But so often we can forget about the 3,000 books, you read, and we can forget about all of the preparation that is behind these individuals that we look up to. And so I think, God has crazy, awesome things in store for us, but we have to be good stewards of our day to day and just growing in those day to day habits.
Yeah, I mentioned I felt called to write at 22. And I will say this, Isaiah, I'm glad I didn't write it book at 22, because I would have had to write a book at 23 to retract what I said at 22. I wasn't ready. I wasn't
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah.
And actually, I was in graduate school and I took one of those aptitude assessments, and it showed a low aptitude for writing. In other words, whatever you do, don't write books. I knew that it wasn't something I was naturally gifted at. And so I knew I would have to take the long road and really work hard at it. And so I didn't just read 3,000 books. I literally reverse engineered them. I tried to study the authors that I really liked. How are they doing what they're doing? And the books that I could barely get through the introduction, why is it that it's losing my attention? And just was very, very intentional about that. And part of that is, it's this idea to play off of the hack your lack. It's hacking habits that other people have. I have become a student of authors and speakers and leaders. I pay careful attention. I try to notice what they do, what they don't do. And then, of course, you got to put your fingerprint on it. You have to own it and let it be an expression of who you are. But half the battle is just, being a really good student along the way, and a willingness, I think, to take the long road.
Yeah, and to fail, I think as well, because
No
there's been
doubt.
times, and I'll get fired up too. I could talk about this forever, Mark, but speaking is the same way for people that listen to the podcast. They might have heard, but there has been, years prior to where if you saw me speak, you would have had a lot to laugh at, and you would have thought, that guy is the last person that needs to be speaking. And, I just built that muscle, and again, have a
Yeah.
long ways to go. Don't get me wrong. Not trying to flex at all there, because I have so much I have to work on. But I just think that the cool thing about it is, as we cultivate consistency with those habits, we can see little improvements. And I can think to myself, well, if I was the best speaker in the world tomorrow, I wouldn't be able to really appreciate it, But every time I get up in front of an audience, it gives me, an opportunity to just maybe get a little better, or sometimes I might feel like I get, you know, barely any better at all. But with each time, with each time you do that habit, it's the whole thing with the practice thing. It's like each time you get behind, you know, the instrument, or each time you get behind whatever the case may be, that's a healthy habit for you. We become better. And so I think it's
Yeah.
definitely crucial to just be able to be okay with, look, if I look stupid, it's okay. Or if I'm not the best at this from the jump, it's okay.
Yeah, no doubt. That willingness to fail, willingness to look foolish. That's the only way
Yeah.
that you have to have a beginner's mindset, or maybe I should say growth mindset. Little
Yeah.
tip of the cap to Carol Dweck. With a fixed mindset, if you fail, you see yourself as a failure. With a growth mindset, if you fail, okay, what's the lesson I need to learn here? And, 9 times out of 10, success is well managed failure. So,
Yeah.
in fact, and I would wish on people, if you're going to fail, do it early and learn those lessons early in life, and they will pay dividends later on.
That's incredible. Yeah, that's so valuable. I love that. It's the whole 10,000 hour rule too. I mean, like I said, I told Beck the other day, my wife, I said, this is the perfect time for us to have maybe some embarrassing experiences. You know what I mean? Because I would rather have embarrassing experiences, in my 20s. And it's okay too if you have, embarrassing experiences in your 50s, but I would rather get them out of the way
Yes,
if I could.
no doubt. Yep.
I love that. So what about you, Mark? If I can flip this on you, what are some daily habits that you have cultivated now that you just have that are completely non-negotiable?
Yeah. I mean, one for me is that daily Bible reading plan. It's my lifeline. It's what keeps me anchored, keeps me grounded. That's a game changer for me. And in the book I talk about, of course, making the habits measurable, meaningful, maintainable. And I'll just mention, my most prized possession is the 1934 Thompson Chain Reference Bible that belonged to my grandfather. And I love seeing the verses he underlined. I love seeing what he scribbled in the margins. And I feel this connection to him. In the same way, I try to read through a fresh copy of the Bible, usually in a different translation every year. And part of that is I want to leave a Bible to all of my kids and someday, if and when we have them, grandkids. But it's meaningful to me because it's something that I treasure. That then I want to flip that blessing for others. So that particular spiritual discipline is huge. I would say that the prayer habit is a big deal for me, and that's probably for another podcast because that's a whole conversation in and of itself. And then, like I said, I go after an annual challenge, and that helps me then. Hey, what am I working towards this year? Is it running a marathon? Is it biking a century? Sometimes I mean it could be hiking the Grand Canyon rim to rim, which word to the wise, you probably need to train for that too, especially if you do it in the summer when it's 110 degrees out.
Yeah, yeah,
Note to self.
no doubt.